Pronunciation is in all four skills. This is the extraordinary thing. Of course, pronunciation is in speaking, but pronunciation is in listening. Pronunciation is in reading. Silent reading has an internal pronunciation. And yet people say they don't teach pronunciation. Well, of course they do. Everyone teaches pronunciation. 100% of every lesson. Speaking, especially the pronunciation part, the production part, is a motor skill. And it needs to be approached as a motor skill, like dance. I mean, dance you learn by dancing, not by talking about it or reading books about it. We listen too much to the linguists. There's nothing wrong with being informed by what the linguist is saying, but they are talking about stuff. And our job as teachers is to cultivate an experience, not to talk about stuff, but have the experience. We are experience makers.
Welcome to the PronSIG podcast. PronSIG, the IATEFL Pronunciation Special Interest Group, has been at the forefront of pronunciation teaching, both in theory and in practice, since 1986. We support teachers around the world in developing their knowledge and confidence in pronunciation pedagogy and fill the gap often left by a lack of teacher training through a wide range of online and face-to-face events, including workshops, conferences, webinars and book clubs, and publications such as our biannual journal, Speak Out, and our monthly blog. In this podcast, we interview key figures in PronSIG history and the wider pronunciation field to provide our listeners the chance to get to know them and their careers a little bit more personally in this format. I'm your host, Mike Budden. I'm originally from Australia, and now I'm based in Berlin in Germany, where I teach English and German. In this episode of the podcast, I talk to Adrian Underhill. Adrian is well known in the pronunciation field as the author of the Sound Foundations book for teachers and the IPA chart layout, which is found in many, many course books. Adrian is the past president of IATEFL. He's also an international ELT consultant, a regular conference presenter. He's a series editor of Macmillan Books for Teachers, and he's been a teacher trainer for many, many years. In this episode, we talk about his childhood, Adrian's journey into teaching. We talk about pronunciation as a physical skill, the connections between pronunciation and music. We talk about what he describes as speaking from the heart, the origins of the phonemic chart and sound foundations, and also his involvement with PronSIG and TD-SIG. Without further ado, here's the interview. So, Adrian Underhill, it's so nice to have you here today. Thanks very much for coming along for the recording.
Thank you. It's good to be here so far.
I thought we'd start off the chat today by getting to know who you are, maybe in a way that people are not familiar with. So people will definitely be familiar with you as a pronunciation expert and teacher trainer, and your videos online, and the phoneme chart layout as well. But things maybe people don't know about you could be, how it all began and you as a student in school. What were you like in school? Were you a good student?
I didn't really know, and I didn't really find out. I read my primary school reports a couple of years ago because my mum kept them. They weren't as good as I remembered them being. It was all sort of, could try harder.
I've heard you say you were a daydreamer.
Sorry?
I've heard you say you were a daydreamer.
Definitely. I was at secondary school, I was a daydreamer, particularly in things like maths classes and so on, where I didn't know what was going on and I didn't follow it, and I daydreamed. And then we were given the problems to do, and I had to work out my own way of doing it, which never got the right answer. But actually, it much amused the maths teacher. But I was daydreaming. I did a lot of daydreaming at school because I was stuck behind a desk, and there was so much more interesting in the world than sitting where I was sitting.
Was it quite a traditional school environment at that time? Quite, strict in terms of discipline?
Traditional school. Teachers were out of the army. They weren't necessarily qualified as teachers. It was a private school. They all had good intention, and many of them they all did the best job they could. And there's a lot to be said for it, because there wasn't really a heavy syllabus in those days. The teacher did more or less what they wanted to do, which had its plus points and its minus points.
Yeah, okay. Did you learn languages in school?
Yeah, we did languages. I started with Latin, of course, at the age of 9. We didn't really know why we were doing that, but then we didn't really know why we were doing anything. We just did it. and mostly had a lot of fun along the way. I remember school being largely being fun, just a place to have fun right the way from beginning to end until I left to go to the university, which was fun also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we did Latin for a bit. I started before 9. I think I was 7, and I just couldn't get the hang of what was going on. We had this Latin primer that I think everyone has, and I've still seen it around. I didn't understand what we were supposed to do. I didn't understand the tables of verbs, everything.
Right.
But
do you remember what the teaching methods were that were used?
Instruction and looking at books and translating short sentences using some clues that are on the other side of the page.
Yeah.
I think that it was called a Latin primer. It might have been by someone called Ritchie, which is just a name that comes to mind. Then later on, we started to do French, which was kind of more alive and more fun, and perhaps the teaching was different and better.
Okay. So
we had a lot of fun in that too, actually. All the teachers of German and Latin, German, French, and Spanish used stories. They tried to make it come alive. They didn't really have their hands on the kind of interactive exercises and activities that came a bit later on, or that I encountered through ELT. But they did what they could.
Okay. And how would you rate your language proficiency by the end of school in French, English, French, German, and Spanish?
Oh, not particularly good. O-level, and then mainly going to France and getting better at it by being there, really. And I think that I'm one of the people that falls into the category of learning by doing it and having a go and jumping in, rather than school study, though I don't mind study at all.
And what countries have you lived in?
Well, you see, the reason I was at a boarding school was that my dad worked for the United Nations, and so he was traveling in different countries, and the family moved around these different countries. And that was from very early, from when I was 3, that we went to live abroad in different places. And that was very exciting. We lived first in Kenya. It was called Kenya in those days, in Nairobi. My dad actually worked for the government there. His job was always, he was a hydrologist. His job was finding water in places that needed water. And so for agriculture, for growing things, and for people to drink. So we spent our lives in dry countries in need of water.
Okay.
Later we moved to Libya, and that was in the days of King Idris, before Gaddafi and before everything else. And then we moved to Jordan, and then to, that was in the early 60s, and then to Mauritius, which was the one exception country where there's a lot of water, but it didn't go into the right places.
Right.
It went into the sea. And then we moved to Crete, fantastic, extraordinary place. And then my dad retired to head office, not retired, but went to head office in Rome, FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization.
Okay.
So but after university, I was in the UK. I lived my adult life in the UK.
Right. Okay. So when you lived in Rome, or when your father retired, you were still living at home, I guess you could say, so with him. So what age were you at that point?
Well, from, up until the age of 16, 17, 18.
Yeah. Okay.
And so then I had the time at school in the UK and holiday time in wherever it was that he and my mother were.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think those experiences of traveling and living in different places as a young person shaped your views of language learning and maybe, influenced your teaching in any way? And
changed my view of life.
Absolutely. I'm sure it did. Yeah.
My view of what's possible, what people can do, how you can travel, encountering entirely unknown things. people, their customs, foods, the kind of problems that everyone faces, traveling in those days by boat and later on by plane.
Wow. I mean, it must have been, or they must have been experiences that peers of yours from the UK would never have dreamed of.
That's quite right, yes. And I think I'm very fortunate, along with my brothers, to have had such a varied time.
Yeah, yeah.
And to see life from different aspects.
Yeah.
And to encounter all these, to encounter so many people, and so many kind people, so many people of all races doing their best to live, and very largely very kind.
And experiencing that everybody has very, very similar values, no matter what their language background is, where they live. You know, everybody wants the best for their family and their
a human recognizes a human.
Yeah.
It's marvelous.
And have you learned, you said that you lived in the UK predominantly after that for the rest of your life. Have you spent a lot of time focusing on learning a particular foreign language?
No, but I have spent time experimenting, learning different languages through methods, particularly Gattegno's subordination of teaching to learning, and was fortunate enough to meet Caleb Gattegno in 1976, actually at IH in London, and to have a one-day workshop with him, and thereafter to meet with him once a year when he came to run his week-long weekend workshops in Bristol at the Avon School. That was an incredible experience and really quite formative in my teaching.
Okay.
Not necessarily to make me teach by what people would conspicuously see as the silent way, or actually the subordination of teaching to learning, but to give me a grounding in how not to tell people things, how not to teach by telling.
Okay, so for those that are not familiar with Caleb Gattegno, so he's a name synonymous with the silent way, is that right?
His name has become synonymous with the silent way, though he didn't call his language approach the silent way. That was a nickname, but actually he was a mathematician and a polyglot, and teaching languages was a sort of sideline that he got known for.
Okay. And some of the videos that I've seen of you, and one that was also influential for me in my teaching, one of the big ones is it's one that you did for Macmillan, I think, about 15 years ago. And a lot of that you do silently. So you demonstrate sounds. So that's obviously something that has stuck with your teaching throughout your career since that moment.
Absolutely, it has. But, you know, don't tell the student what they can work out for themselves. Or, in sterner terms, don't steal the student's learning from them by shortcutting it. But, of course, tell them what they can't invent for themselves.
Yeah.
So, you know, where's one and where's the other?
Yeah. Okay. So that led you down a path of helping students discover the muscle sensations for themselves instead of instructional telling them what to do. Yeah.
Well, yes, but it's, in a sense, it's more than that, because there are, to my mind, quite a variety of interesting approaches to pronunciation. But if I'm to be very critical, I would say that most of them miss the key point, and that is that students need to reconnect with the muscles. And that actually requires a particular kind of going in and a kind of getting to know them, because you've got to, if you're a second language, and you've got to get behind the habits of the first language, which is all established in the neurology. An acoustic the acoustic side, and you've got the muscular side, and you've got the neurological side. you've got to get in there and help the student to get hold of the muscles so that she can push them around and actually hear that immediately, that acoustic change. And when you do listen and repeat, you bypass that.
Why is it not that obvious to people?
Sorry?
Why is it not that obvious? Yeah, I am I was. There's a comment on a video of yours where somebody said that teaching pronunciation. Here it is. Teaching pronunciation as a physical activity is a game changer. This is a teacher who made this comment, and I just thought, but pronunciation is inherently physical, of course, right? But that's still obviously not clear to people, to earlier career teachers, perhaps, and to many students as well.
Perhaps the physicality is clear, but the way of touching, of animating that physicality, the awareness of that physicality, and most important, that the student can do something that very delicately controls that physicality, and they can actually hear the difference of sounds. They can hone into a sound that is their mother tongue version of the target sound thereafter. And then just they know what is the little thing I play with, and they can hear it. And there's not much to play with. There's lips, there's a jaw, and there's a tongue. There's a voice box that's on or off, and there's air which is pushed, more or less. And that's it. And most of it can start very happily in this area with those three muscles.
I've been teaching, I had the feedback a couple of times in the last couple of weeks in my own teaching where I've helped students, I've guided students to a particular sound, and then they'd say, oh, it feels weird. Like, oh,
yes, that's right, yeah.
Oh. Like it's foreign to me, like a sound in German, for example, where you have to drop your jaw more than we would naturally in English. Like, oh, it feels weird. And there's a bit of internal rejection because it's not familiar, but
yes,
kind of logical.
The physicality is weird. And suddenly to hear in your neurology with your ear that you're making this other sound which you've never made before in your life. I mean, let me just give you a simple example. When going back to French at school, there's a sound which is approximately U in French. And you have this word you, tu, and we would say tu. And the teacher said, no, tu. Yeah, tu. No, tu. And so it would go on. And we could hear that it wasn't what he was saying, but we had no connection with what do you do to do that. Now I know you just get your students, well, you work with the lip muscles and you go E-U, which is English vowels, E-U, and there you are with oo. And when you say oo in English, the tongue is back. But you say to them, look, make the E sound, which is tongue forward, E, and just keep your tongue where it is, but push the lips forward, E, and suddenly you're in that territory of sounds which you find in French and in that family of sounds in French, German, and Scandinavian language and so on. And he if he'd known that little tiny example of physicality, he could have guided us there in 10 seconds. And we would have done the work, we would have done the muscle pushing, and he'd have just provided the framework in which we did something with our muscle.
There is then an extra step, isn't there, to remind students to go back there on a different day and to consciously, remember how we described how to make that sound. Let's try and do that again. So they're able to, through repetition, form that new habit. Well, so that motivational, encouraging part is super important too, right?
It is forming a new habit, and once it's formed the new habit, we can then cease paying attention to it because it's now become habitual again. But we have to be careful with the word repetition. Yes, it needs practice. And I think repetition covers two things. Repetition covers sort of mindless repetition that you do while you might be daydreaming or thinking. And it covers, so to speak, mindful, where you are attending to the fullness of what you're doing while you're doing it, and therefore gauging it with your ear, and perhaps even trying moving the tongue back or forward or something, and you hear immediately a tiny, tiny difference. That's mindful. So yes, repetition. I would call it practice.
Yeah, but yeah, okay. But make sure you're connecting it as well to, being conscious and connecting it.
There's a problem with the word repetition. It tends to mean the same as last time, doing again the same as last time.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And it shouldn't. Every repetition ought to be learning from last time, and therefore slightly different, never repeating.
In my own German learning experience, there were some sounds that were quite challenging for me in the beginning, and then some sequences of sounds as well, where I noticed my tongue had to move quickly to a new position or something like that. And I found that through repeating maybe a little chunk of language that contained that challenging phrase or those challenging sounds,
Yes.
My mouth was able to find more efficient ways to get there, and I was then able to produce some sounds with less effort than it took in the beginning.
That's a very good example, isn't it? We learn a new skill, a new activity. Maybe it's something to do with the piano or something to play with the guitar, And at first, you learn the sequence with the fingers, and you do it clumsily with too much effort. And gradually, you find the smoother and the minimal effort with the maximum impact way to do it. The body is good at that, though we do have to watch it because the body doesn't always pick up on it, and we can remain clumsy for a long time if we're not watchful.
I had a trumpet teacher once who said to me, and you would appreciate this, he said, practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent.
Yes, very good.
I thought it was very wise. And I like to tell my students that as well, because we can definitely get good at practicing the wrong thing, right?
I think it's a very good thing to remember that practice doesn't make perfect, because it's got to be the right kind of practice. What kind of practice? Mindful practice, maybe. And what is that? How does practice isn't repetition? That's my point. And I think that it's easy to fall into that. And our teacher training easily has repetition drills which are allowed to be repetition rather than incrementally better with every single
I see.
Every single practice, every single time.
So you're saying that each repetition should have conscious effort to slightly improving it and build upon it from last time.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that you've got a cycle which is actually not repetition. It's constantly building on the one before.
Yeah.
But something you mentioned about German, I mean, or your language, your German learning experience, in all languages, the mouth makes shortcuts. It gets good at sounds. And then after a while, we start to make shortcuts, too many shortcuts, and we start to mumble in that language, perhaps. Too few shortcuts, and we perhaps remain rather clear in that language, whatever it is. But lots of the things that are described in English are just the mouth making shortcuts. When you say you are, your mouth shortcuts and puts a kind of w in between the words. You are, simply because of where it's going.
Yeah.
And if you come from another language where the shortcuts are a bit different, you might not end up doing that naturally yet. But as you start to learn that language, its shortcuts also come in.
German learners definitely, there's more separation between words in German,
Yes.
More glottal stops often between the words.
That's right.
And some of my German learners would take, an, of course, like an apple. And I would say, okay, when do we use an? When do we use a? And they would say diligently, before a vowel. I'm like, that's right. But then they might still say an apple and put a gap in between it. And I would say, well, hang on a second. This grammatical feature has evolved through the pronunciation requirement.
That's lovely. Yeah, that's a really good example. So what do you do then?
I pointed out, I mean, it's difficult. I sort of have to sell it to them a little bit because it feels a little bit foreign to them sometimes. And a lot of German speakers have this idea that you have to speak English very, very properly, and that features of connected speech are not natural. So I've compiled a list of German connected speech features that I go through with them to say, look, we do have linking in German. We do have reductions and other things like that. Just it works in a different way in English.
Yes, and what's proper in German is not proper in English.
That's right, yeah.
And they've got, our students have to learn a new properness, which is, and it's hard to give up the old proper.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to talk about the history of the language is very,
Yeah.
very different. So they have this Hochdeutsch, this High German idea, which they like to transfer to English and think that, RP, BBC, English, or whatever you want to call it, kind of represents the equivalent of High German. But of course, English has very, very different history, very different
Yeah.
relationship with the connotations associated to upper class and the influence of African American culture in pop culture in the US. All these different factors have influenced English in very, very different ways, of course. So that needs to be pointed out. Absolutely.
It is very fascinating, isn't it?
Mm.
And that, as people keep saying, as long as you're clear and you're saying what you want and you're being understood, almost anything goes, because there are so many Englishes now. People are getting pretty used to it.
Yeah. We touched on music a little bit. I might ask you about that too. I forgot to mention at the start of the podcast that you and I chatted a little bit at IATEFL already. We just released that podcast episode.
I was delighted to find that you're a musician. And I saw a clip of you playing a little bit of a Hendrix lick on your guitar with a big band. I thought it was tremendous.
Thank you. Yeah. On a personal note, I played guitar all through school and then played trumpet for a long time and focused on the trumpet. Yeah. And I do really love trumpet and big band sound, but I just, in the last 12, 18 months, I've consciously decided to come back to guitar, and it's it's so satisfying to reconnect with what my true love was, I guess, musically in that sense.
Oh, yes. And very different instruments too, very different sensation, and probably quite different wiring in the brain, because there's a lot of fiddly stuff with guitar, whereas on trumpet, the fiddly stuff is elsewhere. It's not in 10 fingers moving.
Yeah. Well, I like to say that trumpet playing helped me just develop a bit more conscious awareness of tongue position, breathing position, openness. Yeah. I had a trumpet teacher that used to refer to the air column of air coming up out through the mouth to make sure that nothing is blocked with the back of the throat or anything like that. So even before I saw the cross section of, the articulators and everything with the tongue and the throat, I was like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. But when I show it to other students, they go, wow, I point out how big the tongue is, and they're always really, really surprised to discover that. So that helped me with trumpet playing.
I think it's an extraordinary instrument, the trumpet, because it can be played with such precision and sensitivity, not just the sort of blasting out that I associate maybe with military bands or something. But hearing what, for example, like someone like Wynton Marsalis can do, both in jazz and in classical, it really is quite an experience.
Yeah. So what instrument do you play? You're a guitar player, right, as well? Guitar. But you mentioned piano before.
I've had a go at piano. I've had a go at lots of instruments. Sitar I learned for a while.
Oh, wow, okay.
I learned the Turkish ney for a while. And I've learned other stringed instruments like banjo and mandolin and so on. But really, at the end of it, I have enough trouble just playing one instrument, so I've dropped the others.
So how prominent has music and music performance been throughout your life?
Oh, very prominent. I started playing in with a friend of mine at school. We played folk music in those days, and we used to go around the nursing homes that were in Eastbourne, where I was at school, and just sing for them for an hour or so on two guitars, and we had a lot of fun. They had a lot of fun. We'd sing along, and then I stopped. Then I discovered folk clubs in the UK and went to those for quite a few years, and then I got into jazz playing.
Okay. Have you been performing as a jazz musician?
Sorry.
Have you been performing for a long time as a jazz musician?
Yes, I have. Yes, a long time. I regularly play in bars and restaurants. Not so much these days, once or twice a month.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I'm focusing more on jazz improvisation at the moment, and I continually see parallels between learning language chunks and learning jazz vocabulary on the guitar.
Yes. Very interesting. I'm glad you say that, because that's been my experience too. And I can remember when I was starting out teaching, after 2 or 3 years, I started International House in London. After 6 months, I went to help with the opening of a new International House school in Hastings. And after a couple of years, we opened an executive school where there were private lessons given, or small group lessons to business people. And I remember at home working on listening to jazz solos that I loved that were quite complicated and working them out bit by bit and just playing, in those days, the tape or even the record again and again and again to hear it. And training then I realized I was training my ear to hear it and afterwards to replay it in my head, where I could play it a bit slower and then catch it. Because in those days, you couldn't slow things down like you can nowadays. You have to catch it at full speed.
Well, you could, but it would be the wrong pitch then all of a sudden.
The wrong pitch, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so then I realized it was quite possible to catch with your ear and to make sense of it afterwards. And I started to use that with my students. And even if they were fairly elementary level, we would listen just to the news headlines, which I would record so we could go over it again and again and help them to realize that they could catch, that they had the acuteness of hearing to catch. And on the board, they'd make guesses to what, and very quickly they found they could largely build it up and hear what the sounds were or leave gaps where they couldn't. And their hearing improved immensely. And that was simply from my realizing that I could do that for myself, in this case with music.
Wow. Okay. So that's authentic listening right there, right? If you took news headlines, so you recorded them on a cassette tape, did you say, off the
reel to reel at first?
Oh, wow. Okay.
and then where they were, and then cassette. Yeah, that's right.
Because I do that in my teaching. I pull up YouTube videos and then I help my students transcribe what they're hearing. But it would have been very challenging to do that before this technology.
But it's this is what humans can do, and this is helping students to really use the whole sort of biological body toolkit that they've got. And we're terribly clever as teachers, and our course books are terribly clever. But in many ways, we do too much for our students, and we leave them with just one thing that's got to be done. I'm exaggerating.
Actually, I'll add at this point that it was when I did my Delta, I think in 2018, that I saw that video of you online that I mentioned before, when you were getting the participants to make the sound silently. Well, you were silent and you were prompting them to do it. And you became known for me as a pronunciation person.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that was kind of something that I wanted to work on. It was only then later that I realized, well, the focus kind of also needs to be on listening. And now I absolutely see listening as before pronunciation, in a sense, so that the listening discrimination is a part of that sequence before being able to produce it themselves. And maybe that's something that's not focused on perhaps as much. If you're just going straight into helping students get sounds and helping them find sounds, but you're not giving them the chance to do any listening discrimination first.
Oh, yes, I think, it's a good point to raise. It's definitely a good point. And of course, listening is part of the whole thing. But there is something extraordinary about, if we're just talking about individual sounds, and I don't think the main center of gravity of pronunciation is about individual sounds. I think it's about energy distribution across an utterance. That's what it's about, and that's what is key about English, and I guess about most languages. But if we're just to talk about sounds, which is like sort of one of the ingredients, when a student starts to find that they can make a difference, let's just take an sound, and they can go from and they can play around in the zone. And the zone that's English, so to speak, English, is also quite a big zone, but only one of those 5 that I just said is in that zone. And when we help a student just to play with it, and they suddenly find the place where they can adjust that, a tiny bit of lip movement, tiny bit of jaw movement, tiny bit of tongue movement, and they see, and they begin to hear it. Oh, yes, I can hear that. I can hear the difference. Okay. Now, they don't know at that point, let's say, which is the English one. And so that's something, what they can invent is how to move around in that territory, but they can't know. And so then I say, yeah, that one. Take a snapshot. What's a snapshot? That means a physical sensation, the proprioceptive snapshot of what they're doing. And you've done it once. Now you can come to that again. And it's the same with more difficult sounds, perhaps, for people. So there's some, excuse me, there's something to be said for discovering sounds from the inside. And if I start providing sounds, as soon as I provide a sound from the outside, the exploration of the interior shuts down. That's the problem with listen and repeat after me. There is no or minimal exploration for most students.
I see, yeah.
But I don't disagree with what you're saying at all.
Yeah.
Pronunciation is in all four skills. This is the extraordinary thing. Of course, pronunciation is in speaking, but pronunciation is in listening. Well, we know that too. Pronunciation is in reading. Any silent reading has an internal pronunciation. Even in native speakers, to quite a degree. Certainly in people learning language, there is a silent voice in the head, sub-vocalizing. Now, that means that every bit of reading is a rehearsal of a pronunciation. It's not just reading, it's pronunciation rehearsal. Or writing. You're going to write something, and then the students are given 2 minutes to write something down. Okay, so how do you write? Well, you formulate the sentence in your head. How do you formulate it? Well, you don't just spell it in your head, you say it. And there's a pronunciation. And then when you're happy, you write it down. Now, pronunciation isn't everything. And yet people say they don't teach pronunciation. Well, of course they do. Everyone teaches pronunciation 100% of every lesson. Even a 1 hour silent reading is a 100% pronunciation lesson. And what
I was so glad to hear you say exactly that. I think it was in 2024 in the other Brighton conference as well. And that led me down the path of presenting myself on the topic of reading, I think, well, among other things, of course. But the notion that when we can read so proficiently in our first language, we can do it relatively silently because the brain these pathways have been activated so many times that it is possible to look at a sentence in your first language and you just immediately understand it. And you don't realize that understanding is based on the phonology of the language. But to strengthen those connections with the new language, we need to be activating that sound as much as possible. So with writing, we have to get students to at least sub-vocalize in their minds, or they could say the sentence aloud first. But they want to default to doing it silently, and it sort of feels natural because that's what they do in their first language. But so I think this is a bit of a trap, foreign language learning, to want to get too quickly to your proficiency of the first language in terms of reading and writing.
Yeah, I mean, if a teacher is not working on pronunciation, then when a student reads, the sub-vocalized pronunciation defaults to the mother tongue pronunciation. And all that they're gaining by reading for an hour is associating the wrong sounds with the English spellings.
But Adrian, of course, the general advice there is, well, what is intelligible is enough, right? So if it's understood, the CLT era stuff is like, well, you just need to be able to understand the text. That's the purpose of the lesson.
Yeah, but the purpose of the lesson isn't to associate the wrong sounds with the words.
I agree, yeah.
The purpose of the lesson is not to rehearse mother tongue sounds with foreign language or second language writing.
Yeah.
I mean,
I agree.
There's a thing here which I think is also interesting, which is that, and we encounter it when we're just looking at a phone number and then tapping it in. You say it in your head. You look there, and most people, a lot of people, not perhaps everybody, it just comes out of short-term memory as a bit of speech, numbers. You've heard it. You've heard it. There's an inner voice. So when I say to students, I say to them very often, listen and don't repeat. And that just means, okay, listen to this little bit or listen to something I'm going to say, and then just be quiet. And then afterwards, can you hear it? Can you hear my voice still? Yeah. Can you hear the words? Yeah. Okay, well, how many words? Well, five words. Okay, right. What's the second one? See, and it's all there, and we're inviting them to rely on an inner recording, a temporary recording, which we'll delete after a few seconds until we start playing with it. And then you can go from there and say, well, okay, make a sentence that you want to say. Make a short sentence. Get ready. Okay, can you hear it? What you want to say? Okay, and do you know which words you're going to stress? Yeah, okay. Have you joined the words together? Yeah. Can you just kind of get ready to say it? Practice it, but don't actually move your lips yet. Okay, when you're ready, say it. Now, all that internal rehearsal with the inner ear and the inner voice is really powerful. But we don't use that. It's not part of our methodology.
Well, there's more and more literature talking about the phonological loop. I think in the purpose, or that it's. I think Gemma Archer and Robin Walker, they mentioned in their teaching book recently that it's essential for the activation of the phonological loop for it then to be sent off to long-term memory, which is a nice.
Yeah,
to remember exactly what you've just described, really, isn't it?
Well, it's about time, yes, I mean we can. Short-term memory and all the rest of it. But I mean, the thing is, when something is said, allow students just to savor it for a moment before spitting it out as a repetition. And then play with it, and then enhance it, and then say it, not every time, but many times, to use that sequence of inner hearing, inner speaking. And then, of course, after inner speaking, there could be mouthing. In the way that flute players may finger without blowing, or saxophone players. I mean, musicians, or a trumpet, you may, you're working with part of it, with the physicality of it, and not with the sound. And then
I heard once that there was, I think when you visualize something, there's similar activation of the neural networks as to when you actually do it. If you also do that activity physically, so a race car driver who visualizes driving around the track, for example, in the evening before the race, then that can activate important pathways too. So
that's right, and a visualization, which these days doesn't just mean a seeing component. Is an important part of rehearsal of all sports. I mean, don't forget that speaking, especially the pronunciation part, the production part, is a motor skill, and it needs to be approached as a motor skill. And like dance, I mean, dance you learn by dancing, not by talking about it or reading books about it or being lectured on it.
I'd like to ask you about your career, come back to you a little bit again. So you started ELT teaching in 1973. What was happening around this time? So I just did some teacher training and we talked about audiolingualism and CLT. What were there language labs everywhere? Were people, was there just lots of mindless repeating, or was CLT really dominant? And what did that look like at that time? Can you remember?
I applied to in 1971 I found several language schools in London, the Yellow Pages, and I wrote to them and said I want to teach. I got an interview at 2 or 3 of them, and they all rejected me. They asked me questions about grammar which I couldn't answer. And then one evening, Mr. Cantons, bless him, phoned me up one Sunday evening and said, my teacher's just left. Could you come and start teaching tomorrow? And I said, yeah, but I don't know how to teach. And he said, that's all right, I'll tell you in a moment. And then he then told me where the school, he wasn't going to be there the next day, where it was, how to get in, who to speak to, what the class was. and then when I said, well, yeah, but how do I teach? He said, I think it was first things first. Pick up a book and just do what it says.
Follow okay. Go through the activities in the book.
So I went to it, had a lot of fun. Not really doing what it said, but just what you do when you don't have any experience. You just talk and you ask questions and you tell stories, and it was great. And then I discovered International House, and I did a course, and which was fantastic. I always swore at school I would not want to be a teacher, but I loved this, what we did then in the old International House. It was then a 4-week course. And I did that in 1971 or 72 as well, 72, I think. And that was a real breakthrough. I loved the dynamism and the focus and the class participation and the element of fun, not just fun, but joy. That really struck me, and that stayed with me. And so to come to your question, yes, there's quite a lot of repetition, a lot of drilling, which seemed like a lot of fun. And classes were very active and loud and noisy. And, it was good. It was really good. And then the language lab, I loved the language lab. And I really, I'd worked in the language lab of French at university, and I'd enjoyed that a lot. Because I found that when I heard myself, I could do something with it. And then, because in a language lab, I didn't repeat, you listen to yourself again. And there was an opportunity to get the cue to say your thing, to hear the so-called correct answer, and then to say it again yourself. So you had a chance to repeat the correct answer. I loved that. And of course, there is a lot of repetition in that. And then when we started the school in Hastings, we got a lovely new Tandberg language lab. And I was sort of nominally in charge of it, and we would take lessons there. And I really learned a lot from when the point where the student is working on something, the teacher listens, hears what they're doing, and then sometimes interrupts to assist. And I found that it was the interaction between the student and what they were hearing of themselves on the tape. Sometimes they didn't hear what there was to be heard, and sometimes they did, but it was there on the tape, and they were kind of just poised, ready to hear it, but not quite hearing it. And my job was to sort of nudge them to hear what the tape of their voice was telling them about what they just said. And I found that tremendously rewarding, and I think they did too. And it was language labs all the time had a not very good name because people thought you just sat in a language lab and repeated. But when the teacher did what they're supposed to do and really helped to the student to meet the results of what they'd just done and to play with that and to use the lab to then improve that, fantastic results, and they all loved it.
So were they used they were used in parallel with regular classes, were they?
Yeah,
so you would have
exactly, yes. So you'd have maybe one lab lesson every couple of days if you were a full-time English course.
Yeah. Okay. And the CLT is also known as being a bit pronunciation light. Did you experience that? I mean, it led to you then maybe focusing on pronunciation a little bit more.
Well, it was a while before so-called community language teaching came in.
Right. Okay.
But when that did, a lot of the sort of nuts and bolts sort of floated gently out the window of these kind of planned lessons. And I remember myself I thought the idea of community language teaching was brilliant, but I didn't really get how these books were proposing us to do it. But yes, to come to your point, some of this stuff did disappear. Some of this attention to detail, and that attention to detail is partly for its own sake, but partly it's for to help the student to use the human faculties to pay attention and to hear what's going on. There's a certain discipline of attention, and that discipline of attention is the learner's best friend. And I found it difficult to mesh that with community language teaching, though then later on I found out how to communicative language teach for myself, and it kind of all made sense.
Yeah, okay.
I'd say that's what I do now with attention to detail.
Yeah, okay. I mean, of course, in an ideal world, we can bring these different elements in together and,
yes,
more communication focused in one bit, but then also working on fine tuning specific elements, as you say.
Absolutely, and moving back and forth between.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's terribly important. I think it's really helpful for students to be working on a little performance in every lesson, and that's why I like to work with poems. Not to teach poetry, but because they are perfectly formed little globules of English, let's say 30 words or 40 or 50 words, with and everything that's in a poem is exactly what you do in real life speech, joining words and having stress and intonation. It follows conversation. I'm not talking necessarily about Shakespearean sonnets. I'm talking about sort of today's free verse. And
right. To be honest, when I hear you say poems, I think, isn't the vocabulary going to be dated? Are there going to be useful language chunks for the students?
Oh, no, but I mean, you're dealing with today's poems, and you're getting students to write poems and
right, okay,
finding a poem on the underground, all just today's stuff.
Okay.
And if you look at odd words and update it yourself, or the students update it. No. What I'm getting at is with a poem, or it could be a short text of 30, 40 words, just working on it for a little bit of time to get it to a higher so-called performance level. And all you're attending to is the phrasing, so that you know which words are stuck together and where the pauses are, with the energy distributions that you've managed to find the stresses which are the speaker stresses, that is the ones the speaker wants to put in, which is largely the tonic syllable, largely, but we don't need to call it that. The unstresses, terribly, terribly important in English, and a weird thing for speakers of many other languages to come to English and to drastically unstress a syllable to the point of disappearing it. And yet that is the correct way. And then with the context of this poem, if you just work on it for, a few moments or over a week with a class or a lesson, you just have a little performance bit that comes together. It could just be one phrase from the class, which is spoken at a higher level. You've just taken a bit more time over it. Or it could be a short text, or over a longer period. It could be a long story of 1,000 words, that too. But a place that holds practice and learning, so that there's something they're doing which is has got a higher level of fluency, commitment, attention to detail, rehearsal, rather like a performance, a stage performance, a theatre performance, a film performance, a song performance, a stage performance. And then what we do is to have a little festival at the end of whatever that period of time is, where people, let's say a week or 2 weeks, where people just do the little poem that they've connected and that they've been rehearsing. So what I'm getting at here is that there's something about performance which is can be missing from classes. Preparing something to a really high level. The same as you do when you're doing a gig. You play around at home, you do lots of music, but there's something that you pull together with your chums and you go out and do it. Same as that.
Yeah. There's a demonstration of you doing that I was watching before. There's a video online of you working with some teachers in Gaza, 2018, I think it was, and you were going through this kind of speaking from the heart, I think is the name of it, and you demonstrated exactly what you're describing now. And it was nice that you say, so comfortable intelligibility is the new goal. This is what you say in the video. And you say it has more to do with connected speech rather than individual sounds. And you've mentioned that, I think, in this conversation as well already, that the individual sounds are less important than, as you say, energy distribution.
Yes. Just to interrupt there to say the individual sounds are terribly important as the ingredients of connected speech, but we need to leave them behind, because after a while, it's the energy distribution that takes over, and the sounds kind of enable that. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. Yeah, no, it's just super interesting to see the detail that you went through. You're highlighting the what did you, the speaker stress, as you called it, in the speech group, I think?
I called it the sense group.
Sense group, that's right, yeah.
Just the words that hang together. And it could be a chunk, and actually very often it's a tonic intonation unit, but I don't call it that.
Yeah. And how do you find students of different language backgrounds maybe are able to pick up on things like pitch and energy distribution can manifest itself in pitch, high, low, in length, in volume. Yeah, every now and then I have a student that struggles to hear pitch differences.
Yes, it's absolutely true. Everybody comes to it differently. The majority of people, when they pay attention to it and when they have fun with it, this is so essential. Fun is not a kind of nice extra. It is a loosening of the kind of internal grip that prevents me from improvising, that prevents me from having a go, that prevents me from wanting to fall over and mess around in this new medium. Most people are up for that. And I think I think improvisation is terribly important. And I spend quite a bit of time with teachers working really on, make a plan, but because then you've got a safety net, just like when we play music, we've got a sequence. But if we're improvising, we're probably not going to play that unless we have to. And so for teachers, make a plan, but don't necessarily follow it. Let go of it. Follow it, but be 51% attentive to what's actually happening in front of you and follow that. Mm-hmm. And probably at the end of the lesson, you will have done the lesson and with a lot more fun because you worked with the energy that was there. Instead of constantly squashing the energy that's there in order to follow the plan.
And one thing that might not be in phonetics books or whatever for teachers books, you do talk about this joy and having fun and exploration. So how important for you is it to create an atmosphere in which students feel comfortable exploring?
That's it. That's 100% important. And it's that's what we've got to have. Then things begin. Yeah. And that's an interpersonal thing. I think some of that comes with facilitation skills, which is something I'm very keen on, which is not quite the same as teaching skills, and which I've advocated since the mid-'80s, but never got terribly far with it. And it comes from connection and having people speaking from the heart, listening to people, getting people to say what they want to say. And
it's going to come out funny once or twice, maybe first. And
sorry, say that again.
It might come out a bit funny once or twice, and students have to embrace that. And I get students saying, "Oh, I don't like the sound of my own voice."
And I say, "Well, that's a wonderful thing. Listen to it again. Say it. And now, who else can say it? And can you say it like that? Can you say it like her? Can you say it like yourself? Say it like someone else. Who can say it really badly? Who can say what they think is well? And, let's mess around."
So that's what you do to foster this positive atmosphere. Yeah.
Get people to forget about mistakes are wrong and right. There's only what happens. And yes, some of it accords with what is called correct for that language, and that's the direction we're heading in. But we get there by goofing around with a purpose and with a direction.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to talk about IATEFL a little bit and PronSIG and the TD-SIG as well. So many newer teachers, IATEFL members may be unaware of just how instrumental you were, not just around the beginning of PronSIG, but with the establishment of SIGs in the first place. And you helped start TD-SIG. What was happening around that time? Was the industry abuzz with, oh, let's do this, let's start these SIGs? What was going on?
What was happening around that time? I was based in the UK, And there are a lot of private language schools that were very interested in teacher development, a term that was kind of emerging then alongside teacher training, which meant expanding to a wider set of human skills that had to do with teaching and learning that may have been imported from outside that weren't. And I said I was based in the UK, and there's interest in that, but it was also the same outside the UK with the schools that I encountered and the reading that I met from around the world. Everybody was more or less there. In the UK, schools would often, every good school you went to had a notice board full of workshops that were going on by other schools. And there was a network then which existed. You move around, go to schools on other schools on a Saturday or Sunday and see what was going on.
By school, you mean language school? So you will have students full-time there.
That's right. Thank you. I'm talking about language schools. So teacher development came out of the idea, my idea of it, which is not necessarily everyone's idea, was personal development as a teacher. So what are the skills, personal skills that will help me in the classroom?
Okay. So what role did you play in the formation of the TD-SIG?
Well, I think, as I remember, I'd started a group which was aiming at this and was asked why at IATEFL in about 1985, why don't you start a special interest group? That's something we'd like to do. So I said, well, what is that? And said, okay, yeah, we'll do that. And by 1986, I might have got the year a bit wrong, we launched it and as a special interest group with a newsletter. It's all kind of, making up as we went along then. There weren't the guidelines that there are now.
Yeah, okay.
And from there on, thick and fast, new special interest groups until about 10 years later when you had about the current 14 or 15 and occasional new one after that.
Yeah, okay. What can you remember about the early days of PronSIG?
Well, a lot of fun. I remember Michael Vaughan Rees was very active, Jonathan Marks and others. It was so interesting because they were able to take this thing called pronunciation and help people to focus on it. It was something that people did have difficulty with because they didn't. One of the reasons that teaching has had difficulty is that we listen too much to the linguists. There's nothing wrong with being informed by what the linguist is saying, but they are talking about stuff. And our job as teachers is to cultivate an experience, not to talk about stuff, but have the experience. We are experience makers. And that's what I wanted the teacher development group to be makers of experience, makers of workshops, makers of improvisations, makers of happenings, the classroom as an event, the lesson as an event, the lesson as a happening. And the PronSIG was able to sort of draw pronunciation out of the woodwork where it was being attended to by some, but not sufficiently, and others were wary of it and didn't really know how to fit it into their classes. Quite rightly, because in the forms that it was being shown, doing minimal pairs and so on, it's got a limited interest, but if the students still don't end up having the minimal pairs, it kind of goes on and on and on. And then tomorrow we do another sound, tomorrow another sound, and it's all bits and pieces. But when the Pron group came along, PronSIG, a whole lot of really interesting, different, fresh activities and enthusiasms. It came out. It was marvelous.
Fantastic. Yeah, I guess pronunciation doesn't lend itself as well to this sort of structured syllabus in a sense, does it? Because it needs to be reactive in a sense to be able to support students as they're
It needs to be there all the time,
challenges.
Just under the surface, emerging just above the surface at any point whenever needed, and then getting out of the way again and re-emerging. It needs to be present, omnipresent. And we need to have teaching techniques that enable us just to appear it and then put it behind the scenes and appear it. It's part of the workings of everything. And it brings a class to life. Students can hear when they're not pronouncing it well. This is the problem. Just as I could hear that we weren't speaking French well at the age of 9. And the teacher was saying, okay. And yet it wasn't. We could hear that it wasn't okay. And for the want of that sound, ooh, we knew we sounded stupid saying ooh. And for the want of the sound, a language was lost, so to speak.
Yeah, maybe there's this perception by teachers like, no, the student's not listening hard enough.
Yeah.
The student needs to concentrate more. Yeah. So this must have led you to realizing that there was a gap in teacher development and conceiving ideas for sound foundations at this point, in terms of how can you help teachers build up their toolkit? And
that's right, you put your finger on it. I saw that there was a lot that we teachers could know and should know to be competent at helping learners with the pronunciation. And that was knowledge that we could learn from the linguists, the people that wrote books about this stuff. However, telling the students about it was not a useful aim. What we had to do was to arrange an experience so that they arrived at this knowledge experientially, not through telling. And there, I think, and that was the big challenge. And I read all the other books on phonology for teachers, which I enjoyed very much, and they were all helpful, but they were telling, and they were telling me, and probably quite well, but they were not arranging experience so that people could arrive at through experience. What I did with my book was to take the knowledge that I felt we needed, find ordinary language for it, and offer teachers, first of all, experiences to test it for themselves so they could see what was going on, because they have to have that experience. They can't just go and knowledge away at the students, hoping the students to have experience and the teachers having it vicariously. The teachers got to have that experience in them, and then that's what they're trying to ignite in the students. So there's sort of two lots. There's activities running right the way through the book for sounds, words, and connected speech. There's activities, classroom activities, and there's also discovery activities, which are really for the teacher to discover the veracity of this stuff, but also can be used in class. And that was a lot of fun working on that and transferring telling to experience. It's a book of experiential pronunciation.
At the start of it, you say, my hope is that sound foundations will help to revolutionize the way pronunciation is understood and taught in the same way that new insights have revitalized and rekindled interest in vocabulary and grammar.
Yeah.
So has it revolutionized pronunciation teaching?
It's made a contribution, but it hasn't revolutionized. I still think it could do. I still think it's alive. I think to some extent it was ahead of its time, because today teachers are freer and easier to leave the rules behind, to leave the set pieces behind, to improvise. I want to talk about natives, I talk about any teachers anywhere in the world. In lots of situations, people are quite limited. But at the same time, there are also teachers who, within those limits, are finding ways to expand what they do, and to make it more human, more real for the learners, more enjoyable, and more learningful. So, I think it's playing its part. It's playing its part, but I would like to have seen it. Every generation starts again and invents from the scraps that they've inherited.
I came to the book after I saw that talk, I think, of you online, and just seeing you and seeing your energy in the room. When you talk to me here, or if you're giving a presentation, there's maybe a little bit more of a serious note about it, but seeing you there, it was like, oh, this is the joy. Even watching you do that demonstration just kind of embodied the exploration for me, I think. And so that was for me where the big kind of lesson came out of it, which is something that's afforded by being able to watch you do it, I think, more so than a book.
Yeah. Do you know something? I mean, I think that the experience of learning, we humans, when we find ourselves learning something in school, not at school, somewhere.
Yeah.
The realizing I'm learning, this feels good. I'm learning. The moment of catching myself learning feels good. I think actually it is joyful. And I think something about living and being alive is to do with a learning of the moment.
Yeah.
So I do equate joy with learning and learning with joy. I'm not saying the same thing, but I think they have a lot in common. They overlap.
I'm a little bit skeptical of apps and things like that, and everybody's trying to look for a way to gamify language learning. And I just think, well, the learning is the gamification. You get to learn. That's the fun, and when people can see that progress, they're like, oh, okay. We don't want to have the students playing snakes and ladders just because it looks like they're having fun. I don't play snakes and ladders with my students. I get my students to learn. That's where the fun comes from.
Yes. And I think, gamification and all these things can contribute to it. But I think one can get a lot of fun out of more or less any activity. It's the orientation towards it and towards each other, and what one is looking for in oneself. This idea of seeing learning, Gattegno would talk about putting on spectacles that see learning, and to see learning taking place in front of you, to see the small learning moves. And if I can gradually drop my impatience to help so that I am helpful, but the first priority is seeing what's going on in front of me so that any help I offer is just what's needed. I think that's an important thing. What does it mean to feel and see the penny dropping, or the penny nearly dropping, or the penny missing?
Yeah. And sometimes it might even be outside the lesson, right? Later on.
Anytime.
You're not even there for it.
Anytime, yes. And in myself.
I wanted to ask you about the chart a little bit.
Yeah.
So that the chart was, am I right in saying that was released with Sound Foundations? That was something that you did as part of Sound Foundations?
No, the chart was going before, quite some time before the book was written and published.
Okay. And it was a chart that you made for your own teaching, or you distributed it? How did that get around?
It started at the end of the 70s, much inspired by my work with Caleb Gattegno, who used charts for pronunciation and for vocabulary. And I learned from that. I think I put phonemes on the chart instead of colors, and I arranged the chart so that it was had a real order to it. So the vowels were front and back and high and low. So the consonants were front to back. And
I was going to ask you about that exactly, and why had nobody done it before you? I guess you kind of already answered that question, though, in that it was too academic.
It's very odd. I don't know. I suppose because, I don't know, actually. I suppose when you looked at the traditional vowel charts that linguists did, they did have that in them. But those guys were there trying to point out how sounds work in the mouth, whereas I was trying to help students to see a simple order behind the whole thing. And if I just, let me just, here's one. If I just, is that back to front for you, or is that the right way around?
It's the right way around, but some listeners might just be listening on the podcast app. So
okay. Well, I'll just take a second to say that there's the vowels. So there's front of the mouth, back, front, back, and that's the top of the mouth. So that's, and then the consonants also from front of the mouth to back, front to back, front to back, and it's amazing. And then they're in pairs. Well, English has been very thoughtfully designed to have exactly the right number of pairs of voiced and unvoiced, and the right number of sounds to fit on a chart.
Yeah.
So then what to put on it? Well, you could have a blank space. You could have a color. You could have a number. You could have an abstract shape. Putting a symbol on makes sense because that's what's in dictionaries. But I'm not wedded to that. But it is in dictionaries, and a lot of people use dictionaries. So
how do you feel about the fact that it's become so standardized to represent RP or SSBE? We don't have the same.
Are you talking about the chart, or are you talking about the symbols?
The chart, I suppose, but they're kind of interlinked in a sense. So in the US, they're more flexible with symbols, and they don't have a specific layout, and maybe those two things are connected.
It's true. I mean, in the US, it's more to do with what different dictionaries and different publishers want to do, and it's not designed to help learners. That's the point.
Right.
Just as the UK dictionaries before learner dictionaries weren't designed for learners. But then the UK dictionaries decided let's get the English set of the IPA, and after a while, ELT in America also said, well, look, let's make learner dictionaries and let's use a standard American, and let's call it and let's get the IPA that fits that, which is largely the same as we've got in the UK as the British English has.
Yeah,
and there are some differences. I've made an American chart as well. So. Yeah, I mean, the symbols go as far as they go, and the symbol is not to be taken as a standard. It's not to be taken as an RP factor. That prescriptive sense of the symbols, I think, as with prescription in language generally, has largely is disappearing. Has not disappeared, is disappearing, and people are realizing that. A phoneme symbol can mean very many different sounds.
I guess there's some online. Jeff Lindsay has a channel in which he talks about. He has a proposed alternative to some of the symbols in particular. And I asked Jane Setter about this actually when I had her on the podcast, and she said, because in the US, as I mentioned, they're a little bit more flexible with symbols, and different publishers use different sounds. So E is I, Y, for example, to kind of allude to learners that there is a y sound there. So I am will have that sort of natural linking in it, which, to be honest, I absolutely think that that's more helpful for students in a way if they can see that. But Jane Setter mentioned that it would be difficult for publishers to kind of change their course, and that they do have this layout that you put together. So it's really kind of become, it's got some momentum with it. How do you feel about that?
I'm very interested in rethinking the usefulness of phonemic and phonetic symbols. I'm not really concerned with phonetic symbols. I'm concerned with what matters for learners. I think that the excitement of trying to do that for linguists is would be great. It would be very interesting. But how useful for students? I'm not sure. I don't think that the phonemes are there to serve prescriptively. They are just useful and or provisional mnemonics for a sound that the student learns. It's and when with their teacher or with their colleagues, they've decided they've got the version of it that they want, they can leave it behind. Look, I mean, you and I, well, I can look in a dictionary, and my friend in Glasgow can look in a dictionary, and we can argue about the pronunciation of the word. So I go to my dictionary and I look, and he goes to his dictionary, which happens to be the same one. And we both end up with the correct pronunciation of the word, he in Glaswegian and me in Southeast England. And we looked at the same symbols. Now, for me, that's good enough.
Yeah.
He's got a different interpretation, and he will teach his students like that. And and always the students are learning that other people can interpret those same symbols.
Gotcha. So it's just a placeholder. As you mentioned before, it could be a different color, or
it's a placeholder. And on the chart, each of those symbols is in a box, and that box has got all the rest of the sort of permissible ones. Which will vary according to the teacher and used and the location in the world that they're learning and so on.
Okay. All right. I have a question for you based on my own teaching, and maybe you can give me some advice here. I've noticed with teaching English or German, if I have students early on, I can help them develop positive pronunciation habits and be excited about it, and then they can practice from an early point in their language learning career, let's say. So they're solidifying those positive neural connections. But I also work with a lot of older Germans who have more fossilized errors, and I've worked with some school teachers as well, and I can see that Germans are learning English in school, but they're getting very little pronunciation support, and you've got an education system that really focuses on grades over here. Speaking to one teacher recently who they don't even have a speaking or listening exam. It's just written. So pronunciation support is few and far between in the German education system, it seems. Some people say, well, they had good teachers and got lucky, but as a result, I have a lot of older learners who've been pronouncing things a certain way for a while. And Germans, for example, struggle with minimal pairs with final voiced and unvoiced consonants, so bag and back, serve and surf, these kinds of things. So my question to you is, what advice would you give for me or for the learners in that situation when?
Well, the advice that I'd give myself if I was in that situation is to get in there and have fun with connected speech, particularly getting stuff up to performance level, and embed in that the problems that they are having, and embed in the rehearsal that we're doing for our little performance pieces.
So design a poem for them, for example.
Their temporarily upgraded capacity to do that while they're thinking about it. And one of the beauties of performance is that you can, the thing that I most often say when I'm coaching the performance, slow down. For anybody, it doesn't matter. Native speaker, non-native speaker, everyone speaks too fast. I am now. Performance is not fun at that speed. Slow down.
The message speak from the heart is powerful too, right?
You reach a point. Yeah, that's exactly it. You reach the point where express yourself, say what you want to say. Okay, stop. What do you want to say here? And then they read this is a little poem, and we're just doing some rehearsal. Okay, just read the first couple of lines. What are you thinking when you're reading those? Oh, well, I'm thinking about, getting the line. Okay, yeah. Now, just think about what you want to say. Just think about the meaning of that and belt it out. And they try that and they say, oh, yeah, there's a difference. And the rest of the people in the class, yeah, it sounds a bit different. And then they have another go. And you're tapping into a different quality of energy, which is to do with self-expression and, as you rightly say, speaking from the heart. And that just touches something entirely different. And then suddenly it comes alive and you realize that, all this time we're in lessons, we're never speaking from the heart. And if we're honest, lessons only come alive when suddenly someone is speaking from the heart.
I think I know what I'm going to include in all of my lessons now, once a week with my students. I love that idea. Yeah, just ensuring that they really just work on one piece of text and ensuring that they're performing that specific phrase up to 30 words or so to the best of their ability. And 30 words is such a manageable length.
Yes. And you might choose a bunch and they might choose them or they might write them. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But they become permanent for the time, for the duration. And each may have a different one and some may have the same one. Doesn't matter either.
What did you mention a source where if I wanted to Google this or have a look for where I could find some example poems?
Well, I sometimes just Google short poems. I look through, poems on the underground. It's got to be something more or less current, but I do like also some wisdom poems from, way back. Some nice little Japanese poems, and they go into very short things, haiku and other things like that. And you can find those, or you can just get quotes, some nice 4-line quotes from Blake's poetry, for example. Extracts, or I take even some from some of Shakespeare's sonnets. You find nice little 4 lines that actually really work and stand on their own.
Right. Yeah, cool. Okay, I guess poems would, the sheer nature of them, it's clear that it's spoken. It's clear that the words have to have meaning and that there's this performative element to it.
Yes.
So that message would come across well.
I think there are a lot of modern poets who are writing sort of short little catchy things, and there are people writing funny stuff and that plays with language. It's all good. And for the purpose of the class, I just want people to extract, a verse. And we'll go from there. And they may, in their own time, extend it to the whole poem, but it's just a verse is enough. So it doesn't have to be a short poem. They've just got to extract some. I mean, some students, you'll be able to say, choose a poem that you like, go and have a look, go and look online. And some of them may be able to do that. Some may not, and you've got to bring a whole bunch in, which is what I do.
You've mentioned you've done a lot of teacher training over your career.
Yeah.
So you've done, how many lessons have you observed in your career?
A great many. Yes, a great many. And
you said that.
Sorry?
You said that teachers are often happier with less, that they don't push their students hard enough. What do you mean by that?
I mean that in teaching, it's easy. You prepare the lesson, see what we're supposed to do. There's a lot of stuff in the course, but all these bits about language, and we get caught up with our own stuff, the stuff I want to teach, and I miss what's going on in front of me. And therefore I miss the energy of what's going on in front of me and the potential for, if you like, speaking from the heart that's going on in front of me. So I've got to be somehow a master at bringing those two together. And that is going to mean having a prepared lesson, but being willing not to do it or not to follow it, having a prior commitment to what's happening in front. And then this additional commitment to bringing this in, maybe from time to time stopping what's happening there. But as we gain experience, we can mesh the two. I think we can.
You said that you stopped using as many handouts and you started responding to what the students were bringing to the classroom a little bit more.
Yes. Handouts do tend to, at least in my experience, to bog things down. You just get lost in bits of paper and you're just doing things rather than experiencing. I want each lesson to be an experience. Things that have helped me, by the way, are going on improv courses, and I'm not talking about music now, improv, comedy, clowning course, which is also kind of naive in the
Sorry,
best.
you've done clowning.
Yeah, clowning, learning red nose clowning.
Yeah.
Silent.
Okay.
And I found that those kind of things help, improv especially.
Yeah.
Um,
Have you ever worked with improv with your students?
yes, I do. I use improv activities sometimes to generate something, and sometimes just to get ourselves in the mood,
Mhm.
and to indicate a way that we can be together.
Yeah.
Which is that we can be ourselves and we can be alert and on the edge of what might happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like improvisation would be great for just fostering presence in the moment and really tuning students into what did the other person say and ensuring that their response really does respond to it.
Yep.
Must be fantastic.
I think that if you that single thing is the ingredient that we lack in carefully planned lessons, which are going to go from A to B to C to D, following a course book and working to the exam and so on.
Yeah.
I think it is also possible, but difficult to talk about now. You can also improv your way towards the exam.
Yeah.
Perhaps that's the next big project. We're waiting for someone to come up with that.
Yeah. And you've, I'm here recording a podcast, but you're actually now also a podcaster. I had to listen to a couple of episodes with yourself and Jim Scrivener. How did that come about?
Well, we've worked together on and off since about the mid 80s, I think, and at school and in other ways. We got together for quite a while when we were looking at what in the end we called demand high. And then we sort of pushed that out in about 2010 or thereabouts, 2012. And I think we might one day go back to that. There's a lot of mileage in that. But all sorts of strange conversations used to occur while we're doing that. And the podcast is really, Jim said, look, why don't we just have the conversations and record them?
Put them out there.
We thought we'd have a go at that.
Yeah. Has that been an enjoyable experience for you so far?
Very enjoyable, yeah. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. And it took us a while to get to find our own voice because we found it easy to slip into slightly sort of teacher trainery mode.
Yeah.
telling people stuff rather than conversing with each other, which is what the original idea was. So we gradually worked out how to get back to that.
Do you record it in the same room or remotely?
So far, just in the same room.
Yeah, okay. That'd be good.
We'd like to do it remotely, but we haven't quite got that together yet. But you obviously have.
Well, through necessity, I guess. Our last guest was Hansen from Singapore. So,
well, when you're doing different people, of course, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we're coming to the end now. Is there something that you wanted to talk about, something that you'd like to go into a little bit more detail?
Well, first of all, I think it's great that you're doing these podcasts, and I've watched a few online, and it's very nice, to hear this other side of people that may be known to teachers.
Yeah.
And to respond to your questions and to be able to be kind of conversational with you. And
I find people listen, the videos online, you have to sit in front of your computer. If you're like me, you work a lot in front of your computer as well. So that's kind of extra work time. But if you put on a podcast, you can go for a walk, you can drive somewhere and listen that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's really important. And
so special hello to anybody who's driving or walking right now.
Yes. Yeah.
So what has the future got in store for you, Adrian?
Oh, wow. I carry on running courses as far as I can, pronunciation mostly, but I'm doing one on. I'm working at. I'm the senior tutor of a course at Oxford University in the summer, 2-week course. We've got 6-7 tutors, and we have a very interesting time there. I'll be doing a pronunciation for a week, and I'll be doing well-being in the classroom for a week. And the other 6 tutors will each be doing a couple of workshops, one each week. So I do that every summer. I also usually run 1-week courses. I'm running one on facilitation skills this summer at International House. I very much enjoy short 1-week, 2-week courses for teachers that are interested in taking their skills further and exploring sort of the further reaches of teaching and classroom work.
Is that facilitation skills course that you're doing, is that aimed at language teachers?
Yes, very much so. Yes, this is facilitation skills for teachers of English, and well, teachers of anything, but it will be mainly teachers of English that are there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up. It's planted a seed for me, I think, to start thinking about the importance of exactly that kind of training and that skill, which is not something in any course book or teacher training. It's not in the CELTA course. I didn't learn about it in the Delta course.
You're absolutely right. And it just going back to an earlier part of the conversation, it's something that I had, and how times change, it's something that I remember suggesting at diploma level conferences back in the 80s, that we need facilitation skills. And it was poo-pooed. It was just thrown out. People thought that was, but and now everybody, times have changed, and people see, that's a legitimate part of what we're trying to do. We haven't got around to including it yet, but maybe there's some way that we can do in the future. Times have changed.
Fantastic, Adrian. I think we might come to an end there. It's been great. I've really enjoyed this and enjoyed putting my thinking cap on and getting some support from the team as well. So thanks to everybody else in the PronSIG team suggesting some things that I can talk to Adrian about. And I'm sure it's been wonderful for the listeners up until now too. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been great here and to be here and to talk with you and to hear your thoughts and your experience, and to sort of get pushed by you and bounce around these ideas. I like it very much.
For our listeners, Adrian and I had a quick chat just in preparation for this recording, and he asked me, "So is this going to be a conversation, Mike, or more an interview? What's going on?" And so I thought, well, I want to keep my nose out of it if I can as much as possible, but we're here to listen to you. But it's a bit different. Fantastic.
Well, Mike, thank you very much. I really appreciate you doing this and your openness and your attitude to doing this work.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks very much to our listeners for making it to the end of the podcast. We hope you are enjoying the podcast interviews so far. Be sure to subscribe and or leave us a review if you haven't already. And for information about our upcoming events, head to pronsig.iatefl.org. That's it for now. We wish you a fantastic and a productive week, and we look forward to having you along next time. Bye.